Imagine a civilization so advanced that it built the world's first sewage systems, so sophisticated that it created perfectly planned cities with running water and underground drainage, and so powerful that it controlled trade routes stretching from the Arabian Peninsula to Central Asia. Now imagine that this entire civilization, spanning an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, simply vanished from history, leaving behind only silent ruins and an undeciphered script that has baffled scholars for over a century. This is the mystery of the Indus Valley Civilization, and what happened to its 5 million inhabitants remains one of archaeology's greatest unsolved puzzles. 4,000 years ago, the Harappan people, as they're also known, ruled over a vast empire covering modern-day Pakistan, northwest India, and parts of Afghanistan. Their cities were marvels of ancient engineering that wouldn't be matched in sophistication until the Roman Empire. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, their greatest urban centers, featured grid-patterned streets, multi-story buildings with standardized brick construction, and elaborate public baths that served both practical and religious purposes. Most remarkably, every house connected to a city-wide sewage system that channeled waste away from living areas, an innovation that predated Rome's famous aqueducts by over 1,000 years. The Indus Valley Civilization represented something unprecedented in human history, a Bronze Age society that prioritized urban planning and public health over military conquest and monumental architecture. While their contemporaries in Egypt were building pyramids and Mesopotamians were erecting ziggurats, the Harappans focused on creating livable cities where ordinary people enjoyed luxuries like private bathrooms, standardized weights and measures for fair trade, and sophisticated water management systems that prevented flooding during monsoon seasons. Archaeological evidence reveals a remarkably egalitarian society. Unlike other ancient civilizations that constructed massive palaces for rulers and elaborate tombs for elites, Harappan cities show little evidence of extreme social stratification. Houses varied in size, but followed similar architectural principles, suggesting a society where wealth differences existed but weren't extreme. The absence of weapons, fortifications, or depictions of warfare in their art suggests that the Harappans achieved prosperity through trade and cooperation, rather than military dominance, making their sudden disappearance even more mysterious. The civilization's commercial influence extended far beyond the Indus River Valley. Harappan seals and artifacts have been discovered in Mesopotamian cities, Arabian Peninsula trading posts, and Central Asian settlements, indicating sophisticated trade networks that connected 3 continents. Their merchants dealt in luxury goods, precious stones from Afghanistan, gold from southern India, copper from Rajasthan, and timber from the Himalayas. This extensive trade network made the Harappans wealthy enough to support populations exceeding 40,000 in their largest cities, comparable to medieval European capitals. Yet by 1800 BCE, this thriving civilization had begun its mysterious decline. Cities were gradually abandoned, trade networks collapsed, and the sophisticated urban infrastructure fell into disrepair. Within 2 centuries, most Harappan settlements had been completely deserted, their inhabitants scattered to smaller villages in the Himalayan foothills. The collapse was so complete that knowledge of their script, their cities, and even their existence was lost until British archaeologists rediscovered their ruins in the 1920s. The first theory proposed to explain this dramatic collapse was foreign invasion. Early scholars, influenced by colonial-era assumptions about ancient history, suggested that nomadic Indo-European tribes called Aryans swept down from Central Asia around 1500 BCE, conquering and displacing the peaceful Harappans. This Aryan invasion theory seemed to explain both the civilization's sudden end and the later arrival of Sanskrit-speaking peoples in the Indian subcontinent. However, modern archaeological evidence has largely discredited this invasion theory. Excavations at Harappan sites show no signs of massive destruction, burned buildings, or evidence of warfare that would indicate military conquest. Instead, the cities appear to have been gradually abandoned over several generations, with inhabitants simply walking away from their homes and never returning. Skeletal remains from the period show no increase in violent deaths or evidence of battles. Most tellingly, the transition from Harappan to post-Harappan cultures appears to have been gradual rather than sudden, suggesting cultural evolution rather than violent replacement. Recent genetic analysis has provided crucial evidence against the invasion theory. DNA extracted from skeletal remains at Rakhigarhi, one of the largest Harappan sites, shows that the civilization's inhabitants were descended from ancient Iranian farmers who had mixed with local South Asian hunter-gatherers thousands of years earlier. Crucially, these 4,600-year-old samples contain no genetic markers from Central Asian steppe populations, indicating that no large-scale migration from the north had occurred by the height of Harappan civilization. The genetic data suggests that any later arrival of Indo-European speakers was either much smaller in scale or occurred after the Harappan decline. The most compelling explanation for the Harappan collapse comes from climate science rather than archaeology. Advanced analysis of marine sediments off the Pakistani coast has revealed dramatic changes in monsoon patterns that began around 2500 BCE, precisely when Harappan cities started showing signs of stress. The research, conducted by scientists at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, used DNA preserved in ocean floor sediments to reconstruct ancient weather patterns with unprecedented precision. Their findings reveal a catastrophic environmental shift that would have devastated Harappan agriculture. For millennia, the civilization had depended on predictable summer monsoons that brought life-giving floods to the Indus River system. These seasonal floods deposited fertile silt across floodplains, enabling intensive agriculture that supported large urban populations. However, around 2500 BCE, global climate patterns shifted as a new ice age began settling over the Arctic, pushing storm systems southward into the Mediterranean and disrupting the delicate balance of South Asian weather systems. The consequences for the Harappans were devastating. Summer monsoons, which had reliably flooded their agricultural lands for thousands of years, began arriving later and with less intensity. Rivers that had been dependable sources of irrigation became unpredictable, sometimes flooding catastrophically and other times barely flowing at all. Crop failures became increasingly common, forcing farmers to abandon the productive but unreliable river valleys and migrate to areas where rainfall was more consistent. Archaeological evidence supports this climate-driven migration theory. Excavations at late-period Harappan sites show clear signs of adaptation to environmental stress. Houses built on higher foundations to avoid flooding, water storage systems enlarged to cope with unreliable rainfall, and agricultural tools modified for different farming techniques. The cities themselves show evidence of gradual decline rather than sudden abandonment, with outer neighborhoods emptying first, as inhabitants moved to areas with more reliable water sources. The discovery of ancient river channels buried beneath modern landscapes has provided dramatic confirmation of the climate change theory. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have revealed the paleo-channels of the Saraswati River, a major waterway mentioned in ancient Hindu texts but long considered mythological. These buried river channels show that a massive river system once flowed parallel to the Indus, supporting numerous Harappan settlements. Carbon dating of sediments from these paleo-channels indicates that the river began drying up around 2000 BCE, forcing the abandonment of dozens of cities along its banks. The most recent archaeological discovery has provided stunning evidence for this environmental catastrophe. In 2024, The Archaeological Survey of India uncovered a 23-meter-deep paleo-channel near the village of Bahaj in Rajasthan, along with artifacts spanning from 3,500 BCE to 1,000 BCE. This excavation revealed evidence of 5 distinct cultural phases, showing how local populations adapted to changing environmental conditions over millennia before finally abandoning the region entirely. Computer modeling of ancient climate patterns has revealed the global nature of the crisis that destroyed Harappan civilization. As Arctic ice expanded during the beginning of the current interglacial period, atmospheric circulation patterns shifted dramatically. Cold air masses that had previously remained in the Arctic began pushing south into Europe and Asia, displacing the warm air currents that had driven South Asian monsoons for thousands of years. This wasn't merely a local drought, but a fundamental reorganization of planetary weather systems. The Harappans' response to this environmental crisis demonstrates remarkable resilience and adaptation. Rather than simply abandoning their cities immediately, they spent generations developing new survival strategies. Archaeological evidence shows they experimented with different crop varieties, developed new water conservation techniques, and established trade relationships with regions that weren't affected by the climate shift. Some communities managed to survive in reduced form for several centuries before the deteriorating conditions finally forced complete abandonment. The civilization's final chapter played out in the Himalayan foothills, where winter storms from the Mediterranean provided more reliable precipitation than the failing monsoons of the river valleys. Harappan refugees established smaller agricultural communities in areas that are now part of modern-day Punjab and Himachal Pradesh, maintaining some of their cultural traditions, but lacking the agricultural surpluses necessary to support large cities or extensive trade networks. Even these highland settlements eventually succumbed to environmental pressure. As the Ice Age deepened over the following millennium, even the winter monsoons that had provided refuge began to fail. By 1000 BCE, the last recognizable Harappan communities had either dissolved or been absorbed by new populations moving into the region. The sophisticated urban civilization that had flourished for over 1,000 years effectively vanished, leaving only scattered rural populations with dim memories of their ancestors' achievements. The mystery of the undeciphered Indus script adds another layer to this civilization's enigmatic end. Despite over a century of attempts by linguists, archaeologists, and computer scientists, the meaning of Harappan writing remains unknown. Recent efforts using artificial intelligence and machine learning have identified statistical patterns in the script that suggest it represents a true writing system rather than simple pictographs. But the actual language it recorded has been lost forever. The brevity of most inscriptions, averaging only 5 symbols, and the lack of bilingual texts like the Rosetta Stone have frustrated all decipherment attempts. The latest breakthrough in script analysis came in 2024, when researchers using advanced computational techniques identified 67 core symbols that appear in 80% of all known inscriptions. Machine learning models have also been developed that can predict missing portions of damaged texts, potentially providing more material for future decipherment efforts. However, the fundamental challenge remains. Without knowing what language the script represents, or having longer texts to analyze, scholars may never crack this ancient code. The loss of the Harappan script represents more than just an archaeological puzzle. It symbolizes the complete cultural discontinuity caused by the civilization's collapse. Unlike other ancient societies that left extensive written records, mythologies, and cultural traditions that influenced later civilizations, the Harappans vanished so completely that their successors retained no memory of their achievements. This makes the Indus Valley collapse unique among ancient civilizations and suggests an environmental catastrophe so severe that it severed all cultural connections between past and future. Modern climate science has revealed disturbing parallels between the Harappan collapse and contemporary environmental challenges. The same types of monsoon disruptions that destroyed their agriculture are occurring today as global warming alters atmospheric circulation patterns. Rising sea levels and changing precipitation patterns are already forcing mass migrations in Bangladesh, Sub-Saharan Africa, and other vulnerable regions. The Harappan example serves as a sobering reminder that even advanced, well-organized societies remain vulnerable to environmental changes beyond their control. The Indus Valley Civilization's disappearance stands as one of history's most complete societal collapses, demonstrating how quickly human achievements can be erased by environmental catastrophe. Their story challenges modern assumptions about progress and permanence, showing that technological sophistication and urban planning cannot always overcome the fundamental dependence of human societies on stable climate patterns. In our era of rapid climate change, the silent ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro serve as both archaeological treasures and warnings from the past about the fragility of human civilization itself. As archaeologists continue excavating Harappan sites and climate scientists refine their understanding of ancient environmental changes, the mystery of this lost civilization continues to evolve. Each new discovery adds pieces to the puzzle, while raising new questions about how one of humanity's greatest early achievements could vanish so completely. Perhaps most haunting of all is the realization that if not for chance archaeological discoveries in the 20th century, we might never have known that this remarkable civilization existed at all.